evening, good morning, good afternoon. Yesterday, we had a discussion on this platform where we're discussing the issue of the violence that have marred the elections in Tanzania. And one of the things that was mentioned in that discussion was that Zimbabwe had the opportunity to implement the democratic reforms which would have got the country back on a democratic footing. We have wasted that opportunity. Other countries like Tanzania, as much as they failed to hold free, fair, and credible election, I think they have not had the same watershed elections as we did in 2008, and then given the chance to implement the reforms, which was the primary purpose of the 2008 to 2013 GNU, and we wasted it. And ever since, there really has not been any political will on the part of ZANU-PF or the opposition to implement the democratic reforms and get back the country on a democratic footing. In the case of ZANU-PF, I think many people would agree that the regime was not going to implement any reforms to reform itself out of office. That goes without saying. On the part of the opposition, they have paid lip service to reforms. One of the classical examples will always be the Constitutional Court challenge by Chamisa of the 2018 election results. To talk of Chamisa and his team being incompetent, I think is an understatement. Here is the video of the court proceedings at what I would consider to be one of the most critical moments in that court challenge.
You are ready now to start. I am ready. You may start. Thank you, my lord. What ZEC has done is to violate the constitution, to violate the electoral act in a manner which has ultimately benefited the first respondent. National and Central, page 159, the report by the ZBC, it does two things. Number one, it mentions figures. Number two, it attributes those figures to a ZEC official. It says by 5:30 p.m., 105,000 people had voted in National and Central. The final figure that one gets from ZEC is that an hour and 30 minutes later, plus 370,000 people voted. Is it humanly possible? But it doesn't end there. Then there is the issue of identical polling results. There are at least 16 polling stations with identical results. Identical results for Chamisa, identical results for Mnangagwa, identical spoilt votes. And in all those places, Mnangagwa not only wins, but wins big. It's like a kid was playing with the figures. That, with respect, is not how an election is conducted.
We'll now give the opportunity to Mr. Kanengoni.
The Zimbabwe Electoral Commission cannot be taken to task to say, why is the voter turnout in my central at this particular level and not at that particular level? Voters behave the way they do. No one knows why. Maybe behavioral scientists may be able to answer the question if they study it.
Mr. Kanengoni, there's the averment that several polling stations showed identical results.
And the simple point we make is that there's no need to be theoretical about it. We have the returns. This is something that happened. We show you the returns. And we've put the returns for 2 of those polling stations here to illustrate the point.
You say it happened?
Yes.
But in his presentation, Bofo said it's actually 16 polling stations where the identical results. You heard it?
Yes, we did. Even in the affidavit, they put a bit more of the polling stations there. But we chose this to illustrate to the court. But for the rest, it did happen. It did actually occur.
We'll now go back to the applicant. Why go for speculative conclusions of manipulation?
The point that I wish to make is that this is evidence of manipulation by ZEC after the process. Now, if you go to what they call the primary data, you're going to see manipulated data. So the applicant cannot ask a court to open residue which has already been manipulated. If you go to the residue, you will drink from a poisoned well. When you look at the figures, let's look at those that have been admitted by ZEC. Let's look at the parliamentary tally.
I'll stop it there. I think this is one of the cases where to say the lawyer was incompetent is an understatement. The Chief Justice asked, why are you going for speculative results? That is important. You are speculating here that the data was manipulated. In this particular instance, particularly, asking the court to open the sealed boxes would have been the smoking gun. Because as much as one can see the obvious conclusion actually with these 16 identical polling stations with identical polling results, and with one overriding factor that Mnangagwa was not just winning, he was winning big. The obvious conclusion here was these must have been duplicate entries. They looked for the V11 forms where Mnangagwa was not just winning, but winning big, and entered them again. So in this case here, that is the obvious conclusion. And it will not be a matter of speculation. If you go and say, okay, let's ask the court to order the opening of the 16 polling stations affected. It's one thing duplicating the V11 form. Yeah, that can easily be done. But if you're going to duplicate a polling station, then you've got to duplicate the box the sealed as it is, and have the staff, because when you open these sealed boxes, the staff who were involved at the polling station are the ones who've got to be there and saying, yes, this was the box, and we sealed it, and the seal has not been broken. There was no way SEC was going to produce the duplicate polling sealed boxes and the duplicate stuff. There's no way. So here one is going to ask, who is it we're saying, no, we don't want to open the box? And it is none other than Chamisa's lawyers. His argument is, we don't want to drink from a poisoned well. It's the most idiotic argument anyone's ever heard. You don't have to be a lawyer. That was absolutely idiotic. This is an opposition that really has no intention of pursuing this issue that the elections were rigged. They're just going through the motions to cover up. But the other aspect here, which must also be emphasized, is the very fact that this is not a case of the Chamisa versus Mnangagwa. This is a case.
You may start. Thank you, my lord. What ZEC has done.
This is a case of Chamisa versus Mnangagwa per se, but also question of, are the elections free, fair, and credible? This is in the national interest. This is a case where the two individuals are just symbols. The most important thing is the nation itself has got an invested interest in the case. Were these elections free, fair, and credible? We're talking about yesterday how violence has been caused because people felt the elections were not free, fair, and credible. And in our case, we've had election observers telling us the elections were not free, fair, and credible. So the constitutional challenge of the results in 2018 were absolutely of paramount national importance. So one is going to ask, so why did the judge himself, Chief Justice Malaba himself, fail to ask ZEC to produce those 16 sealed ballot boxes? This is in the national interest. This is just not a question of one individual versus another. This is in the nation's interest. And yet, lo and behold, the judge did not. Why? These are supposed to be the learned men, Chief Justice. Elections in Zimbabwe have been called as flawed and illegal. Surely the court, if it's not captured, would be doing its duty to make sure that that is either proven once and once for all or disproved once and once for all. I think the failure by Chamisa's lawyer and the Chief Justice himself to have the smoking gun evidence that Zimbabwean elections are rigged was a betrayal of the people of Zimbabwe. This is the most short-sighted decision one could have possibly made in the circumstance. We have other evidence by people like Jonathan Moyo, Professor Jonathan Moyo, of how elections in Zimbabwe cannot possibly be free, fair, and credible. Here is Professor Jonathan Moyo speaking of that.
Chigumba is the mother of the rigging, and Malaba is the father of the rigging. Endorsed what the mother was doing. It is actually scandalous. You see, ZEC is not supposed to be controlled by any authority.
Yeah, it's supposed to be
independent. It is an independent constitutional body. In fact, independent commission. It's a Chapter 12 institution. But the ZEC did not run anything important. It never did. The computers were run by Africom. The registration, accreditation, and so forth were run by a CIO company. So between the CIO and the army, they ran the processes, the operations, using their instruments. Either Matsanga, who is actually active, she's employed. She joined the, not joined, she was seconded to the electoral body in 2008 as a divisional intelligence officer. Now she is a director in the CIO. As we speak right now, she's a director, and she was congratulated and rewarded for rigging the 2018 election. And she was given a house in Borodale, a posh mansion in there. So there is a serious problem that whereas on paper, ZEC is supposed to be an independent constitutional body that runs elections transparently, efficiently, and impartially. No, it doesn't. It doesn't because it does not even itself run. The elections are run for ZEC by the securocrat.
This is the tragedy with Zimbabwe. We have known that Zimbabwean elections are not free, fair, and credible. So it is not surprising that after each election process, they are disputed. There's been violence in 2018, after the 2018 elections. In 2023, the nation was saved from the violence. But of course, the process itself was disputed. We are looking at a situation here where the country is gearing up for 2028 elections. It will be 48 years after our independence. And it will be heartbreaking if we found ourselves in a situation where 48 years after independence, we still fail to hold free, fair, and credible elections. We still deny our own people a meaningful say in the governance of the country. That is the tragedy. We had the opportunity to implement the reforms. We wasted it. MDC wasted it. And ever since the 2008 to 2013 GNU, MDC leaders have conned the people to participate in flawed elections to give ZANU-PF legitimacy. That is the truth. The tragedy with the people of Zimbabwe is we have been slow to realizing what was going on. It was all happening before our own eyes, and yet we refuse to see it. We owe it to ourselves to implement the democratic reforms and end this nightmare of rigged elections. Mnangagwa was told by both SADC and the AU election observers that the 2023 elections were flawed. We failed to meet our own constitutional and electoral act requirements. And we also failed to meet the SADC guidelines on free, fair, and credible elections. Failed. And what does he do? He dismisses that whole report as nothing, déjà vu. This is the tragedy. Dismissing it is one thing, but stopping the anger and frustration that is building up in the nation is another. If we think we are avoiding the violence that we have seen happen in other countries post-elections, we are kidding ourselves. Here's Mnangagwa dismissing the SADC and the AU reports.
Vana vakatuka ZANU-PF kana ini ndonyanyisa kufara kuita zvakanaka. Ukavona vavengi vako vachikurumbidza nekuchikanganisa, ukavona vachiti ZANU-PF yakaipa, farai. You are doing great things for your country. Hongu takaita maelections edu kuna vamwe vaitaura zvisina musoro zvikanzi maelections anofamba zvakanaka ndezvavo.
Well, we can pretend that we have nothing to do with those adverse reports. The truth of the matter is the failure to hold free, fair, and credible elections is what is holding back the whole nation. Zimbabwe is a failed state because for 45 years and counting, we have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections, which would have enabled the nation to elect competent leaders. We are stuck with this ZANU-PF corrupt, incompetent regime because they rig elections, and we are stuck with them. The frustration that is building up in the nation cannot be denied. We can either have peaceful democratic changes or violent ones. We've frustrated the people of Zimbabwe for far too long. And yet, in all honesty, we are heading straight for that. Because as Mnangagwa said in the last clip, all the reports that we are failing to hold free, fair, and credible elections, as far as he's concerned, it's nothing. The regime is not implementing even one token reform between now and 2028. So we are going to have a repeat of these rigged, flawed elections in 2028. See it coming. Yes, 2023 we didn't have any violence. We may not get away with it in 2028. And it's not only the violence that is a problem. The fact that we are stuck with a regime that we know is corrupt, is incompetent, and yet we cannot remove it is a serious problem. The fact that we know we've got a regime that rigs elections makes Zimbabwe politically unstable. Who would want to invest in a country that is politically unstable? Is always under the threat of political violence breaking out. No one. I think we need to focus on the issue of sorting out this problem of rigged elections with the urgency the matter demands. At the present moment, the ideal situation would be that we implement the democratic reforms. So come 2028, we have free, fair, and credible elections. I don't see that happening. ZANU-PF has no intention of implementing even one token reform. And the opposition, such as it is, they have no political will or muscle to get any reforms implemented. So we are going to go into 2028 with not even a token democratic reform implemented. What shall we do? We should stop participating in the flawed elections. Because as long as we participate, we give ZANU-PF legitimacy. That point has been made again and again ever since the 2008 to 2013 GNU debacle. SADC wound Chamisa, Tendai Biti, Morgan Changirai, Welshman, all the MDC oppositions in 2013 that they should not go into those elections without first implementing the reforms. They paid no heed. They participated. And they've been participating ever since. And now they've reached a point where they are actually conning their supporters to participate, telling them that this time we will win. Hashtag God is in it. Coming back to the issue that we started with, where the opposition is paying lip service to free, fair, and credible elections, just as they paid lip service to seriously challenging the 2018 elections. That is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. We should not keep on participating in flawed elections to give ZANU-PF legitimacy. That point must be made and must be underlined. We owe it ourselves and posterity to put an end to this madness of rigged elections and perpetuating the dictatorship. We can do so easily by starting to address those Chamisa Chete Brigade members and making sure that they understand the sheer folly of participating in these flawed elections, the sheer folly of believing Chamisa's idiotic lies of winning rigged elections, the sheer folly of believing Chamisa is serious about stopping ZANU-PF rigging the elections. Think about it. Thank you very much, those who were able to join us this evening, and hope you'll be able to do it again tomorrow, 6 o'clock UK time, 8 o'clock Zimbabwean time. See you then.